this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check us out on YouTube and Facebook and our podcast and our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita with Dawn Matera, Italy Rooting with Letizia Sinisi, and Abiativo Casa with Sabrina Franco. So today we have a great guest from New York. I haven't interviewed somebody from New York in a long time, Maria Fosco. So welcome, Maria. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate this so much. Nice to see you.
Yeah, so being a fellow New Yorker, where you from?
I was born and raised in Astoria, Queens, in a very heavily Abruzzese community. Yeah.
Ah, so you know Monte Cristi.
I went to Monte Cristi.
Oh, what year?
I graduated in 1980.
Oh, 69.
Oh, that's great.
I'm an old guy, see. We paved the way. We paved the way for you youngsters.
Yeah.
So how close did you live to Monte Cristi?
It was about a mile and a half. I used to walk there. It was easier for me to walk than just to take the bus. But, because I lived on 18th Street in Astoria. Which is, really, it's the very old section of Astoria and the very heavily Italian section. And I grew up there.
Yeah, and I'm going to guess that my uncle's wife, my aunt Dot, probably came from that same area. I vaguely remember going there when I was a kid, so I can't recall everything, but I know her family was from Astoria. But I had to take a bus and 2 trains to get to Monte Cristi until I got my car. So I went from an hour and a half trip down to about 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. No, I used to walk it. It was a 20-minute walk. It wasn't too bad.
No, that's great. Yeah, I used to walk, from the R train.
Oh, yeah.
And but I lived in College Point, so it was, like I said, it was a trip. It was quite a trip.
Yeah.
So now growing up, what was your neighborhood like? I mean, we grew up in Corona, so I'm sure there's a lot of similarities.
There are a lot of similarities in Corona. People in Corona come from, I forgot the name, Monte something in the region of Salerno. That's where people from Corona come from, who've settled there. Where I come from, the Abruzzese settled where I come from, in the 18th Street, 14th Street area, Astoria Boulevard. They were first the Salese, which is a town up near L'Aquila, and then the Orsognesi started to come. They started to migrate and settled in that area. So it was very heavy Italian. Orsognese. Orsogno is the town where we come from. So when I grew up, there were thousands of us there, thousands, to the point, we had a social club there. Actually, we had 2 social clubs on the same block of the same town.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom is Barese, and Corona had a lot of mix of different people because my father wound up there too, and his family was from Naples. But growing up, it's not, these neighborhoods aren't like that anymore. You walk down the street and all you heard was Italian.
Right. Absolutely. That's all you heard. And in fact, my mother never learned how to speak English because everyone around her spoke Italian or dialect. The stores in the area were all Italian. Besides being Italian, many of them were from Abruzzo. So she even spoke dialect with them. So she never learned till her dying day, never learned how to speak English, which was amazing.
Yes, that is amazing. I mean, my grandparents, my mom's mom spoke a little bit. My grandfather, not too much. And my dad's family, I never recall my dad's mother speaking English. We would go there on a Sunday and my father would just speak to her and the Neapolitan dialect, and that was it. But my mom and dad always fought over whose Italian was correct.
My sisters do that because they're both married to Barese.
And that's a whole other language.
Yeah, it's to the point that all right, today is actually my sister's 33rd wedding anniversary. And I, for the life of me, I still cannot understand my brother-in-laws. I have to ask my sisters, what did they say? Because they speak to each other in Buddy's dialect. And I have no clue. And my sister actually explained to me that the Buddy's dialect is also part German because it was taken over by Frederick the Great. And that's why there are a lot of blonde blue eyes people from Bari, and a lot of their Bari's words are actually German words, and I never knew that. This was explained to me by my sisters.
Yeah, my grandmother had blue eyes, but we were just there last week.
Wow.
Sorry to be back, but we we had the driver, that took us around. He was we were talking to him about the language, and he would say something in Italian, and he would say it in Barese, and it was like not even close.
Yeah, no, night and day, night and day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I know.
so now growing up in the Italian neighborhood, I mean, what sparked you to do, any research and follow up, and what have you found?
Um, I was always very interested in the Italian movement, the Italian American community. What motivated them to come here? When they got here, where did they live? What did they do for a living? Their migration patterns. I used to do a lot of studying in migration patterns. You know, um, communities from Little Italy, they move up to Harlem, and then they moved up into the Bronx, or from Little Italy, they moved to Brooklyn, and then from Brooklyn to Long Island. And I always was very curious about why we were in Queens, well, Astoria, Queens. And I sort of realized that the mass migration of the Abruzzese, the Orsognesi, was that they were working in construction, building the bridges, the tunnels, and whatever. So it was convenient for them to live in Astoria. And I found another issue, another situation. Many of the Abruzzese who came, they were anarchists, and they were friends of Carlo Tresca. Carlo Tresca was an Abruzzese. He was from Sulmona, and he obviously he was killed here in Manhattan, but a lot of the anarchists moved to Astoria, the Abruzzese. So one Abruzzese brought another Abruzzese, and I met an elderly lady who was Orsognese, but her father was an anarchist. And she says that's the reason why they moved to Astoria. So it was one Abruzzese brought in another one, and before you know it, you have a whole community of, let's say, Abruzzese living in Astoria, and or like in Corona, I've known that the Neapolitans lived in Corona, and like the Bronx, a lot of the Barres lived in the Bronx, and they migrated to Westchester. A lot of those Barres. So yeah, I find this stuff fascinating. I really, really do.
Yeah,
So
no, me too. Me too. I wish I had started when I was younger. I only got started maybe 15 years ago or something like that. But my grandfather, um, and my uncles when they were younger, they were icemen, and the Barres are known
Barres
to
were
be
Iceman in Coleman,
icemen.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and I can't figure out why, but it was funny because we were in Bari, and I saw a bicycle with a big, like, I don't maybe in a small motorbike. I have a picture. I'll have to check it out, with a basket on the back that said Iceman. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, a real body is an Iceman.
Yeah, I would love to learn about how they became the Iceman and the Coldman. I mean, and even to this day, if you ever speak to anyone who owns the oil trucks, heating oil trucks,
Mhm.
their descendants are Barres. If you speak to them, if you talk to them and ask them about their Italian heritage, they'll tell you they're Barres. So they went from ice to coal to now heating oil companies. So it's interesting how the movement goes.
Yeah, and funny you mentioned that because my uncle, he was actually, I think he was Sicilian. Of course, my aunt was Barese, but he owned an oil company in Corona, minus
Yeah,
fuel oil.
yeah.
And I worked with my cousin couple of summers. And that was quite an interesting job for sure. Um, so now so we both your parents born in Italy?
Yes, both my parents were born in Italy. They went through World War II in Italy. Um, my father arrived here in 1956 because really there was no, Italy was going through a recession. There was no work there. And he settled in Astoria with all the other paisans. And he raised enough money to pay for my mother's passage. So she came here in 58. She came 2 years later. And then they had my sister and bought a house. And then my twin sister and I were born. So, but we always stayed in the same neighborhood. We never moved. My
Hmm.
father never moved. Actually, it's only they moved. My mother moved after my father had passed. She moved about 20 years ago, and she went to live in another section of Queens, which was full of Orsognese. They sort of migrated to another part of Queens all at once. So that was another interesting situation because I said, you didn't really leave 18th Street. Now you're on Hazen Street. They're all the same. They're all the Orsognese. All your paisans are all lined up across the street. And she goes, that's why I moved here. I wanted to still be with my paisans. So,
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. My wife's mom, she grew up in Little Italy on Spring Street.
wow. Yeah.
And so they were right in the heart of things. And her uncle lived there and then, until he passed away. He never moved. He never left
Yeah.
Spring Street.
Yeah. I don't, I get it. I do get it. I know.
Yeah. And they found one bank account with $500,000 in it.
Wow.
Imagine. He never got married. And he had one bank account. That's something.
Yeah, it
I guess he
is.
was saving for a rainy day or something
Yeah.
like that.
Mhm.
So now I'm going to assume you've been back. Yeah.
Italy?
Yeah.
Oh, I go back actually every year at this point. My partner has a house, literally actually in Orsonia, in the town where my family comes from. So he's from that area also. And he has a house, and we go there. The house that my family had was sold about 20 years ago. It was just falling apart. No one had lived in there since the 70s, since like 68, 69. And it was time to get rid of the house. There was no point in renovating it or whatever. Um, so we sold. Actually, the only thing we didn't sell was our land. And I actually went to see it about 6 years ago. I had never seen the land that my family worked on because they had the house in the town and then they had the land outside the town with the masseria. Masseria is the farmhouse. And when I went there, I saw the roof of the masseria had collapsed. The building had collapsed, and there was a landslide on the land. It was sad to see, but we had still had that. But then, because I'm registered in our town, since I'm an Italian citizen, the um, the the town administrators sent me a tax bill for $10,000 because I was the only living relative that that house was that land was attached to. And I said, this is crazy. I barely know where the land is and it's not even workable. And they said, well, we'll make a deal with you. Just we'll take back the land and just erase the tax bill. And I said, fine, take back the land. What am I going to do with it? That was the end of that one. So, but I
Oh,
do go
yeah.
back every
Well,
year. Plus, I've
obvi-
studied it. Yeah,
obviously they just wanted the land.
yeah. They wanted the land. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I mean, we went back to a few places last year. I mean, we had gone 25 years ago and hadn't been back, and now we went last year and we were again this year, and I'm working on the citizenship. I'm so bummed that I didn't do this sooner, but hopefully I'll get it eventually. But I had a situation with my grandmother's father's family, and they had a palazzo in Montebello, and the place is big, and the current owner let us go inside, and it was so sad. I mean, it was nice to go in, but it was so sad because you could see what it once was,
Yeah.
and now it's in such disrepair, and the mayor and the council, they wanted to buy it like 10 years ago, and he just won't sell it. They wanted to fix it, and I don't know, make it a museum, make it a hotel, whatever they were going to do with it. But those towns, those couple of towns in Calabria, same situation. We went down one street, and it was just all empty houses, still with like bits and pieces of furniture and everything in it.
Yeah.
And they told me that people have moved away, and they work in Germany or France
Yeah.
or different places, and they're hanging on to it, but they don't do anything with it.
Yeah. No, I know. But we were able to sell it. We were lucky. We found a buyer and who renovated it, and I pass by every time, and I'm sad because it's my family town. My great grandmother bought that house. She sold her dowry in order to buy that house because she did not want to live with her mother-in-law. And at the time that she bought it, so this was like in the 1890s when she bought it, it was just a two-room little hut, but it was in the town. Obviously it was destroyed during the war, and then my father worked he baked bricks right after the war under the Marshall Plan.
Mhm.
And in for payment instead of money, they gave him bricks, and he was able to rebuild the house, and he rebuilt it, and it was like became 3 stories at one point. So it was a 3-story house. It was like a townhouse type of thing. And when I was a kid, when we went back, we lived there, we stayed there. But then, when you get older, my sisters got married. I had a career. I went to Italy all the time, but I really didn't go back to the town anymore. My grandparents had passed. I hardly had any relatives there, and and the house was in disarray, and so I really never went back. Um, so then we got an offer, someone to buy the house, and we just sold it. There was really nothing we can do. My sisters said, we're not going back to Italy, and we're not going to be pouring money into a house in Italy. And I felt the same way. Like, my life is here, and it was a pretty big house to pour a lot of money into it.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Yeah, but that's cool. So then your grandmother, she must have come from a fairly well-to-do family then to be able to have a dowry like that to purchase a house. Not that the house was that much money, I suppose. But.
Yeah, she did. This is my father's family. They were very wealthy landowners, and I only found this out. I didn't know that they were, well off. I didn't know how well they were well off. And it wasn't until I went back in 2017, 2018, that I spoke to someone who was a historian of the town. He said to me, your great grandfather owned he showed me the part of the land, and he told me the acreage, and I looked up the acreage and I converted it into American acres, and it's the size of Central Park.
Wow.
And I said, it can't be. I said, this is it's doesn't make any sense. He says, no, yeah, because we know what we're talking about. We've looked it up. It was the size of Central Park, the amount of land that they had. And then little by little, it was sold off piece by piece, and then split up amongst, other children and whatever, until it was down to really nothing. And and then that's the reason why my father's parents or my father's family never came here. Not one of them. And it was because they were wealthy. Whereas my other great grandfathers all came here. This is prior to World War II. But they were birds of passage, meaning they came, they worked, and they went back. No one stayed. And I really couldn't understand this whole mentality of not staying. And I don't know it. I do know one great grandfather used to say, America will ruin your families if you stay. Your wives will be liberated. You'll lose your culture, you'll lose your language or whatever. So I don't know if this was the mentality in those days or the mentality was just to come here, make money, and then go back there and buy. Because we didn't come from a family that stayed. My father came in at 56. So we're here fairly recently compared to other Italian Americans. I hear I worked at the Calandra Institute for 25 years. I was, with the museum. All the Italian Americans I worked with, their great grandfathers came here. They all came at the turn of the century or prior to World War One, or, you know, no one. I was as far as Italian American, I was the youngest of the generations that came. I was the newly generation that came. I actually spoke Italian. And in fact, I was the only one in the office who spoke Italian. No one spoke Italian. And that you understand the reason why that, because of World War II, they didn't teach the children the language and all that kind of stuff. Whereas by the 50s, that mentality was over. It was believed that you should teach your children Italian by the time the 50s and 60s came around. So my generation all speak Italian. All my cousins, we all speak Italian, although I have cousins that don't speak Italian at all, which is very, very odd for us. That like they couldn't communicate with their grandparents. Like, how can you not communicate with your grandparents? How can you not like have a conversation with your grandmother? And I was very lucky. I was taught Italian. Well, Italian became my first language. It was originally my first language. I really didn't learn English until I started going to school because we only spoke Italian in the house. And my father was insistent that we speak Italian in the house. He wanted to communicate with us. He wanted us to understand what was going on at the kitchen table. He wanted us to communicate with our grandparents. And my mother taught us how to write little letters to my grandparents in Italy. So we would write, caro nonno, buon Natale, that kind of stuff. And so we would do that. That's the way I grew up.
That's so great. I'm so bummed that they didn't teach us. I was, like you said, all my mother's family, with the exception of my one uncle who stayed behind in Italy when my grandparents came. And to your point, I think my grandparents had planned to go back. But then, World War One had just happened. My grandmother had between World War One and, the end of the war, I think she had at least 2, if not 3 children. I mean, she was, knocking them out pretty quick. And so they didn't go back. And, the interesting thing you mentioned about your family with the land, that was my grandmother's family, my father's mother. When I look at the records for those people, it either says rich person. One thing actually says rich person. And a couple of the other ones say, property owners and things like that. And they had land. They had land in several different places. And last count, my cousin Cinzia over there found like 6 or 7 different properties in different parts of Italy. But same thing, my grandmother and her aunt were the only 2 from the family that came. And I never knew this. Nobody ever said it. Nobody ever mentioned what family was back in Italy. And now since then I found my dad's first cousins still alive. I mean, it's just been an amazing experience for me to find people that no one ever talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I just had this experience, this really weird experience. My grandmother's brother, her eldest brother, came here in 1921. He was 17 years old. He worked here, got married here. He married a woman from Calabria, I believe. He died in 1946 at 42 years old. And the family just disappeared. They disappeared. He had 3 sons. We had no clue where they were. We just found them through ancestry DNA, and we had a family reunion back in May. They didn't even know we existed. We knew they existed. They didn't know we existed. And then I found records that they used to live down the block from us in Astoria. They had all moved to Florida, and we never heard from them again. So we had no.
Well, I have a similar story with my cousin Linda. Like I said, my grandmother and her aunt were the only ones that came. My grandmother's aunt came in 1905, and my grandmother came in 1915. And I never knew about this until I got contacted by Linda, and she said, "I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piramalo, and I think we might be related." I said, "Oh, we're definitely related." I said, "Maria was my great grandfather's sister." Um, a- a- and she was like, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm 100% positive. There's no question about this." And so she did ancestry, and of course, we were a match. We're like, I guess, third cousins once removed or something
Oh,
like that. But to your point, our families were tied at the hip until the 1960s.
yeah.
And we never knew. I never knew about these people. And as we discovering stuff, um, her grandmother was, we refer to her as Aunt Beatrice.
Mhm.
I probably met her when I was very, very young. May even met Linda for that matter. But when I married my first wife, we were going to look at an apartment that my cousin was vacating in Flushing. And we passed this house on Booth Memorial Avenue. And I remember my father saying, "That's where Aunt Beatrice lives." And 20 years old went right over my head.
Yeah.
Um, so now I'm talking to Linda, and she says, "Yes, that's where we lived." And my cousin Gene lived downstairs with his mother. And um, I used to be there every summer. And my apartment that my cousin vacated was 5 blocks away from Aunt Beatrice.
Mhm.
Never knew.
Uh,
Never knew. And my cousins were like close with Jean's mother and my father. My father was a photographer for the Daily News, and I could see the pose of Jean's mom, and I think they got married in 1956 or something like that. And I said to him, I said, "I get." My father took that picture. I could tell
yeah.
from it that my
Yeah.
father. I could see the way she's posed. I'm sure my father took the picture. And my grandfather ran a business. They made bridal crowns in New York City and the veils and things. And when we got to meet Linda, her grandmother had saved beads
Oh,
from my
wow.
grandfather's store, and she brought us all beads.
Wow.
So these things are probably 80 years old, maybe 100 years old. Who knows how old?
Still, yeah, but that's great. That's great. I love these kind of stories. I'm always
Oh,
asking people their stories, always.
well, that's why I do this. People ask me, I said, the stories are similar, but they're different, and everybody's got a different twist on things. Everybody's got something in their background that's similar, but also I'm intrigued by why people came,
Me too.
how they met people. Did they go back to Italy? What was it like when they went back? I mean, we went to Torito last week, and they just,
You're from Torito?
yeah, my grandmother, yeah,
My brother-in-laws are both from Torito.
oh, really? Yeah. What's their last name?
One is Carlucci and one is Macchia.
I have Carlucci in the tree way, way back. I think I have some Macchia. Both my grandparents were Nicoletti, but they weren't related,
Okay,
but
yeah.
they had the same name.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we were just there, and I'm gonna have to send you my tree so you could send it to them, and I'm sure we're related in somewhere down the line.
That is interesting. That's so I went to the Torito dinner dance. There used to be a Torito Mutual Aid Society many years ago, and it was their 100th anniversary. And this was about 25 years ago. And I went to their dinner dance in the Bronx
Oh,
because
that's
they were
so
all
neat.
located in the Bronx. Yeah, they don't exist anymore, but I believe the Torites always have they have a picnic in New Jersey every year in June.
Oh,
I
I
don't know
have
if you
to
know
find
about
out
that.
about that.
Yeah.
I have to find out about that. Yeah, they actually had a small little house on Via Cardona, if I'm saying it right. Yeah, I think that's right. And in fact, the town historian just sent me just today sent me it says like the it's like a card or whatever. I guess I don't know if it's a census type of thing, but it lists the people who lived in the house, and it showed my grandparents and my uncle. Uh, and that was really interesting. But yeah, we'll have to compare notes on that because that's so interesting.
Yeah,
But
it
they
is.
were just so nice to us there. It was just great. My friend Letizia, she's from Puglia, she's from Bari, and last year she did our big tour, and I was just going to go to Torito just to walk around, and she said, no, you're not. I'm going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. So we got to meet the mayor, and they brought us into, to records, and they gave me the records of I had some, but they gave me the records of my um great grandparents, birth and death and marriage and things like that. So that was really, really very exciting.
Yeah.
So now I look at the wall behind you and I see all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, this is my life. This is the life that I don't know if I have or I had or, but actually there are more. I have more in front of me and on the side, and I even have some at home. Yeah, this is 40 years worth of work within the Italian American community. That's really what it is.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I have some stuff on the other wall, from our last trip that they had given us. We had come back. We had to buy a suitcase to bring back all the books that they gave us, and they were all in
Wow.
Italian. So I'm struggling to get through some of them. But every place we went, they were giving us a book or two books about the town, about the history of the town, and things like that. Um, so, so now I know you also are or were involved in the new Italian American Museum going up in New York City, correct?
Well, I'm still on the board. I mean, I'm a founder. I'm still on the board. I was the administrator up until 2008. Um, so I'm like waiting for it to open up again. I have meetings with Dr. Shelsa and the board occasionally. We have to make decisions on things. Um, I'm anxious to see it open. I mean, it was my baby at one point, you know. I remember Dr. Shelsa back in 2001 after 9/11. He had real reservations about it, whether or not we should go forward with it. We had just been incorporated on June 12th. And so this was after 9/11. He said, with all that's going on in the world, I don't know if this has any value or if this is important enough. And maybe we should just, not do this project. Not because at that point we didn't have a building. We just had materials. And the materials were from the exhibit. I'm sure he spoke to you about the exhibit, exhibit of New York, of the Italian Americans at the New York Historical Society. So we had all this material that people did not want back. They told us to keep it. So we had rooms and storage of space, rooms and rooms of all these wonderful items. Like my mother donated her grandmother's sewing machine. And my mother said, I don't want it back, keep it. And so that's how the museum was developed. So we convinced Dr. Shelsa to continue on. That was in 2001. And we did buy the building, 2008. They realized that the building was falling apart. So we made a decision to rebuild. So we tore that down and started rebuilding. It was supposed to have been up by 2020, but we all know the pandemic hit. Everything was at a standstill. And we had a meeting not too long ago, about a month ago. And we don't know if we'll be open by the spring. We're trying. We're trying. Actually, I was prepared for us to be open for this Columbus Day, for Monday. That's how, it was in my mind. We'll be open for Columbus Day of 2023. Obviously, it's not happening, but luckily we do have the funding for it. We have the funding to finish it. So I think that was my fear, that we didn't have the funding to finish it, but we do have it. So it's just a matter of time, and of the contractors just moving it along, and then we have to get back in there and put up all our exhibits and bring back all the items that are in storage. And I think, I don't know if he told you the safe, because the museum was the old Stabile Bank. It had a gigantic safe in it. And the safe was, I don't even know how many years it was at least 150 years old. It was monumental. It was so heavy. They had to get 2 cranes to get it out of the museum from the ceiling, and apparently it's in storage in Chicago right now. But we have to get that back. That's a centerpiece of the museum. So exciting.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I remember when I interviewed Dr. Shelsa that it was like really supposed to be imminent, and like I said, I think I interviewed him, it had to be just before COVID. Because he was one of the first interviews that I actually did, because I wasn't doing the video then. I was just doing the audio, I believe. And I was so excited to hear about it. And so for the people listening, when it does open, what kind of exhibits and what's going to be in there?
Well, we are going to put in the items that we had previously, which will be a permanent exhibit. And those are, all like, the thongs from the Iceman. And we have a gigantic book on, it was a great grandson of a midwife gave us. So especially when it's from Little Italy. So it's a listing of she registered all the babies that she delivered in Little Italy. That will be the permanent exhibit. And then I believe on the second floor, it will be a revolving exhibit. Whoever, because as we used to do this when we were at the Calandra Institute, we had an exhibit space and we would have artists or certain, like the Caruso Museum, they had an exhibit there once. So it'll be changing exhibits on the second floor, I believe. Second floor, yeah. And then I believe we have a terrace to have some events, and I believe we have a theater. So we're going to be doing a lot of things, and it's going to be really exciting. I mean, you don't get to. It's something in life that a lot of people don't get to do. You don't get to say that you founded a museum, something that's permanent, that's a building, that's brick, and you could say, "Hey, I was part of that." So that's really my legacy with in my life. I mean, whatever work I do, I've always done it for the museum. I've done it for Italian Americans. I love doing it, and I have so much pleasure in doing these things. Actually, I'm doing something for my family right now, which is interesting. For my birthday, which was a few months ago, my sister gave me a gift, and it was to write up family stories, write family history. So each week I get a question emailed to me saying, "What were your grandparents like?" Something like that. And I would write up whatever I remember from my grandparents. And that, I would finish that. Next week, I get another question. What did your house look like as a child? Or what did you do as a child? But I've been doing it, and I've been writing about all the family history that I know of. And I believe my sister did this is because I'm the only one in the family who really knows the family history. Because I'm the only one who asks the question. It's really asking questions. That's all it is. And trying to write down. A lot of times I went to Argentina to go speak to my great uncle. And I went there really because I wanted to speak to him about the family history. And he gave me a whole bunch of information. And I actually had to start writing everything down because I could never remember all of this. And, so luckily I even used what he gave me in this. So right now I've written 15 chapters of this, and each chapter is about 7-8 pages. The chapters are small, what was your grandmother like? How did your parents meet? All this kind of stuff. But I'm trying to go back in time as much as possible to at least put it in writing for my own family about what our family was like, what we went through, who was who, what was what, and the little stories, the little anecdotes, the snippets. My mother my mother passed away in 2016, and I went to live with her for the 6 months prior that she passed. I went to take care of her, and every day, she would sit up in bed. She had cancer, and but she was able to function. She was able to talk, and I would sit with her and ask her these just simple questions, you know, and all of a sudden she would just flow. The information would just flow from her. And these are stories I never heard before. She never spoke about it. I mean, she told me the first time that she went to her future mother-in-law's house, it was for her sister-in-law's wedding. And she actually described her outfit to me. and I never heard this story before. And then one story was she was describing her wedding, the dinner at her wedding, and what was served. I had never heard these kind of stories before, and these little things. And then we were talking a lot about the war because she was a child during the war, and she never really talked about it because her mother was killed during the war. She didn't like to talk about it. What happened was a journalist got in touch with me, and he wanted to interview children that went through the war. So as he was he was in Italy. So as he was typing me the questions, I would sit with her and ask her the questions and type back the answer. And I heard stories that were just really heartbreaking that she never spoke about. And in a way, I'm glad I wrote them. I wrote them down for the journalist, but then I wrote them down for myself. So I wanted to record what she had said to me, what happened to her when she was 10 years old. And it was very important. And it's really important for us to know these things. A lot of people say, oh, why do we do this? Why do we go back in our ancestry? Why do we want to know who was our great great grandfather? Who cares? Who cares? And I hear that all the time. It's very important that we learn what our family has gone through, especially if you have parents or grandparents that went through a war, that have been traumatized, that have PTSD, that were taken. Both my grandfathers were taken as prisoners of war. What my father went through when he was 14 years old during the war to keep his family alive and feed them. And then even to learn about like your great great grandfather. I had a great great grandfather who was a bounty hunter. So, and here's the story. He was a bounty hunter, made a lot of money. He had a lot of businesses. He didn't trust anyone, but he had 6 daughters. So what did he do? He educated all his daughters. He made sure they had education. Okay. So these women were so highly educated that they became teachers. And in fact, because I pay attention to family branches and all of that, everyone from that branch of cousins are all educated. And that comes from the fact that the great grandmothers, the 6 of them, were all educated. So they educated their children, and the children educated their grandchildren, and it goes generation by generation. So I always say it. See that branch of the family? They're all educated because of my great great grandfather was a bounty hunter, didn't trust anyone, and educated all his daughters. So this is the reason why you got to learn about your family. You have to learn. And it's amazing what you hear, what you know. And it's let's say your grandfather's philosophy in life. Where did he get that? He got that from his father. Where did his father get that from? His father went through an experience. He went through something else, and he's taught his son something. And these things get passed down through generations that we don't even realize, that we don't observe, we're not cognizant of these things. So it's very important to learn about your family. Very, very important.
Yeah, I agree. And I interviewed and he's from College Point too. I didn't know it when I first met him, Dr. Visco. And his great grandfather was a jeweler in Italy. And when he came to America, when he bought the house, in the kids' room, he painted on the ceiling like a microscope and like the cover of a medical book and a few things like that. And he told all the kids, you're going to be doctors. And the whole family are doctors or pharmacists, or, because he instilled that into them.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about the stories, I don't know if you ever heard of Anthony Riccio. He's passed away suddenly like a year and a half ago. He's such a wonderful guy. He's written several books. But when he was just out of college, he became the advocate for Italian Americans in Boston, or Italians actually in Boston, in the 1970s. And these were people now who had come in late 1800s, early 1900s. They were all in their 70s. And he had the wherewithal to photograph and record their stories.
Wow.
And I'll send you some of them. The stories are just so profound and so deep because it's in their own words
Mhm.
from what it was like on a farm in Italy, why they came, what it was like being in America during the war, what their fathers were like, what their mothers were like. Just amazing. And one story that Anthony told was about this couple in America. The husband worked, he was like a tenant farmer or something like that. Because we were talking about, the men thought they were in charge, but really the women were in charge.
Yeah.
And and the women were smart. They made the men think they were in charge.
Yeah.
But he was a tenant farmer, and the man was selling the farm, and he went to his wife and said, he's selling the farm. I'd like to buy it, but he wants $75. I don't have $75. And she said, wait. And she went in and she came out and had the $75 because she saved every dime, every nickel, whatever he gave her, she put away. So they were able to buy the farm. I mean, it's just, these stories are just amazing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there aren't a lot of us who get it. We
Right.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's extremely important. And it's funny because my twin sister, because I went through my ancestry, I found my grandfather from 1730s. And so my twin sister said, so now what are you going to do with that information? Who cares? Okay. So I told my sister, it matters. Everything matters. Everything, all this kind of information is very important to us. And then she was the one who gave me this gift on my birthday to write down the family history. Because I told her, this is extremely important to know this kind of stuff. A lot of people don't know. I mean, I met this distant cousin, the family that disappeared when we had a family reunion. He knew nothing of his family, absolutely nothing. And it was so sad, absolutely sad. You miss on family history, you miss on what your family went through, you miss out on the culture, your heritage, your legacy. You know nothing of your legacy then. Like, at least I have a sense of what my family legacy was in Italy. At least I have that. A lot of people don't have this, and it's very, very sad. It's because then they start to adopt other cultures and other heritages because they don't know anything about their own. Which is, I guess if they want to, it's fine. But like, why not embrace your own heritage? It's so rich.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I do this, because I feel that, as we go next generation, we're losing that, we're losing our history, our heritage. I mean, especially when you go over to Italy and they're so deep into the heritage and the history, and they're so proud of everything that they have, even these small little towns. It's so foreign to us.
Yes.
And I tell people, people say I'm going to go to Italy. Where are you going to go? Well, I'm going to go to Rome. I'm going to go to Florence. You're going to go to the hometown? No, I don't know. I don't know anybody there.
Right.
But that's where you're from.
Oh, right.
Go?
A lot of people don't even know where they're from. They have
Yes.
no clue. If you ask them, they'll say, "Oh, somewhere in Naples." And I'm like, well, what? You never went. You never asked. You never saw any documents. You never, like, why don't you know? Well, how come you don't know where your family is from? And for us, it was embedded in our minds. It was instilled where we came from. My parents were very proud of Abruzzese, very, very proud. I mean, I'd send you some of the pictures. They used to perform in a folkloric group representing Abruzzo. They went all over Italy. They did an Abruzzo tours film I sent to you. And then when they came here, they were part of a folklore group from Orsonia. And in fact, I was part of that group because um, they needed dancers, and I could dance, and I knew all the dances. So I was part of that for a good 15 years. I was part of that, and I sent you pictures also of that. That was a lot of fun. I was dressed in costume from Orsonia, from our town, and my mother made the costume. Part of the costume was very old. It was my great grandmother's, nightshirt, and the apron was old and whatever. But my mother had to recreate the rest of the costume. So I went all over the tri-state area performing, especially during 10 Heritage and Culture Month. And it was an experience. I met so many people from different communities. I met a lot of Italian Americans. I I enjoyed it tremendously. Plus, when we sung the songs from Abruzzo, the dances, it was part of my existence, and it really made me what I am today. I can't even describe the experience. And God forbid some, other girls or, people my age did that. They wouldn't be caught dead doing that. They were like, what? Get dressed up in costume, folklore costume, and go sing and perform in singing old Abruzzese folklore songs. They wouldn't be caught dead with doing that. And yet I embraced it. I found it as an opportunity. Um, get out of the house, to perform, to dance, to do something. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it beyond belief. And it taught me a lot to be with people and how how to interact with the community, and taught me everything about my own culture. And and it's a shame that other people don't know anything about their own culture. And not only do I know about my Italian culture, I know about my Abruzzo culture, my Orsognese culture. I have tons of books on it that my uncle left me. And actually, I fought with my sisters saying that I have to have the books. They wanted the books. I'm like, no, I get to keep the books. And in fact, for a family reunion, my cousin wanted me to write a history about Orsonia, our town that we come from. So I spent all of last summer, well, summer of 22, researching. So I went to every library, I pulled out every book, I emailed Italy or Sonia if anybody can give me information and whatever. And I wrote a nice 10-page, no, it was more. What am I talking about? It's a good 20, 25-page history on Orsonia, starting from the Roman times. And we published it and handed it out to family members. It was a family reunion. We were over 100 people. So that was nice. And I really loved doing it. I didn't know I knew the history of Orsonia, but I only knew maybe up until maybe from 200-300 years ago. I didn't know anything prior to that. I didn't know that it was really a Roman town. I had no clue about that, and why it was geographically positioned where it was. I had no clue about that. And then in my research, I found everything out. It was part of the path of the Transuanza, where the sheep go from Bari all the way up to L'Aquila. Every year, every season, the shepherds bring their flock up north during the summer and down south during the winter. So our town was smack in the middle. So they would pass us by, and in passing us by, a town was developed there. So I found that very interesting. So, and that goes back to the Roman times.
Yeah, and I learned about that when we were in Capocota, because they showed us the same thing. They showed us the sheep path where they would go from Capocota in the mountains down into Puglia, every summer. And it was like so interesting. And in fact, we went to a restaurant and they made us a meal that the shepherds would eat, similar to what, not exactly, but, this similar kind of thing that they would eat, which was pretty, which was really pretty neat. And I'll send you a couple of those things from Anthony, though. I think you'd be really interested in it.
Yeah, I would be very interested.
He was such a it was so sad. He was such a wonderful guy, and I only knew him, I don't know, maybe 6 months, but everybody who met Anthony came away with the same feeling, that this was a man dedicated to his Italian heritage, and that he would do anything to, propagate the history of the people who came from Italy into America. Mostly in Boston, because that's where he was from.
Mhm.
But it was just a super guy. No question about it. Well, listen, this has been so much fun. I mean, I think we could probably do another 3 hours here.
Oh, yes, probably.
But certainly looking forward to the museum opening. And once it, let me know when it opens, either you or Dr. Shelsa, so I could
Oh,
put it
yeah,
out
we'll be
there.
putting out press releases and all of that. It'll be all over the place when we open. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.